usually just being up there is fine. Yeah. Hey, Richard, you're on the other side. I mean, I don't know why. Hi, everyone. Hello. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary edition of Expo Chicago, the International Exposition of Contemporary Modern Art. I'm Cay Sophie Rabinowitz, Director of Programming. It's my great pleasure to welcome you to Dialogues, presented in partnership with the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Dialogues offers panel discussions, conversations, and provocative artistic discourse with leading artists, curators, designers, and arts professionals on the current issues that engage them. Richard Bell's art practice exists in parallel with the ongoing struggles for First Nation rights in Australia. His statement paintings address legacies of Western colonialization, Aboriginal resistance, and awareness of global struggles for social justice. In particular, solidarity with the Black Panthers and Black Lives Matter movements. This May, Bell will be presenting his major work Embassy at Tate Modern in London. At Expo Chicago, his work is on view for the first time. You can see his work at OSMOS's Special Exhibitions booth, curated into Claudia Segura's In Situ section, just to the right of this wall beside me, and featured in 2 sneak peek screenings at the Gene Siskel Film Center. Tonight you can view You Can Go Now, a new documentary on his life and work at 7 p.m., and stay afterwards for a Q&A. Today, Bell will discuss his practice with Cay Sophie Rabinowitz, founder of OSMOS Magazine, who we are also thrilled to partner with on this conversation. Please join me in welcoming Richard and Cay Sophie.
First of all, I'd like to thank Kate, Jamie, and everyone at Expo. It's been a great collaboration over the years, but this is our best yet. The painting that Kate referred to by Richard is actually on the other side of this wall, sort of towards the entrance. It features Emory Douglas, and we'll see a bit of work on the screen behind us that it features work by Richard. It also features their relationship and the history of their work and participation as activists. I don't know if Richard needs an introduction. In much of the world, he does not. However, he hasn't really been to Chicago and had this kind of both exhibition and opportunity for us to meet him as an artist, as a friend, as an activist, and someone I encourage you to buy a drink for at the bar. Best way. We met through my dearest colleague, Josh Malani, who represents Richard's work in Brisbane. And the 2 paintings that we have at the booth abut a central work that is from 1992. It's a mixed media work. Some of you may have seen it. Some of you may have photographed yourself in it, because it includes a mirror on one end with the text troublemaker underneath. So I would like to first and foremost introduce Richard as a troublemaker extraordinaire and someone who could talk about why it's so important to get in trouble. Why is it important to get in trouble, Richard?
Oh, gee, I got into art to not get in trouble. I was assured actually that I could say and do things in art and not get arrested. Whereas the things that I was doing before pretty much similar to what I do as an artist anyway. So I've found refuge in art. This is an image of one of the most famous protests in Australia. It was these 4 guys went down to the National Capital. It's a rendition of that. I like to make my paintings colourful, sort of. Some might say hyper colourful. And those guys look pretty sharp there. This is the name of the movie. You can see what I'm talking about there.
Some of you might recognize the shape of the white.
Yeah, well, that's a map of Australia.
Yeah.
And there's a text there, that some people take, offence to.
I think it's great. I think it's spoken to many, I've been in the booth while many people have come and looked at the work. That's, I have that privilege. I get to sort of be, not only the liaison, the intermediary, but really I get to observe how the work is received. And, sometimes I can, talk to people. You speak to people, I can talk with them about, their thoughts. And You Can Go Now has made almost everybody laugh.
Yeah.
Nobody was offended here in Chicago. They understood entirely. If you had nothing to say, you can go now. If you have,
I have a T-shirt designed with the map of America.
you do.
The same text. It's in purple, of course.
It's in what color?
Purple.
Of course.
Yeah.
Not red, white, and blue.
No, yet.
All of them together, red, white, and blue, makes purple.
Yeah. That's true.
This painting you see behind us, White Lies Matter, I hope some of you will come and see it in the booth. It's not easy to photograph, but it also requires a certain kind of light. Richard had requested to have it installed in a place where it gets sunlight because that way the light would change over day. Is that right?
You can't see the colouring unless the right frequency is there. Natural light provides those frequencies much more readily than artificial lighting. So, but it fulfills one of the aims of my practice. In that, I, as a lazy black man, put the even lazier white man to work, looking at my paintings. So, here, there, and everywhere. I kind of like that. But these these works look better in a home than in any gallery that I've seen. These are the only works that I've ever produced where they actually look better in a home than under lights in a white cube.
And that's because of the natural light?
Yeah. Well, like it goes across your room every day. Oh, this is a great story. Go back to that one. This is from an incident in 1988, which was the bicentenary of white settlement in Australia. That book is a book about 200 years of white settlement. And the author wanted one of us Aboriginal people, we were down there protesting against the bicentenary. And this guy stupidly wanted one of us to launch the book. We all told him no, in much less polite language. And that guy there, he's one of my cousins, and he said, "Yeah, I'll launch your book." And he said, "Are you ready?" And he launched it into Sydney Harbour. And there was a photographer there, and he said to Billy, he said, "Oh, look, I missed that shot. Would you mind going out and getting that book, so I can get the shot?" And he said, "You want that book? You go out and get the fucking thing yourself." Anyway, he looked around at us. He had all this camera gear, and he looked around at us and thought he threw out there with that. He carried all his gear out with him, paddled out, got the book, came back in, and that's a reproduction of the image of Billy relaunching that book. And there's me up the back there.
You're the small figure in the
Yeah.
left rear.
Yeah.
Billy Reed features in another painting, one we saw earlier. Is that right?
Yeah. He was quite the activist.
He's there and here, right?
Yeah, that's him on. That's
That's
yeah. He got so much mischief. He should be famous. You know, he should be one of the most famous figures, in Australian history. But hardly anybody knows anything about it. And like these are basically history paintings. And as you know, all the art historians here would know. History painting was the top dog. Back in the day. And I'm making history paintings. I must be the top dog. So woof woof, motherfuckers. So,
well, you didn't just commemorate that piece, Billy and other cousins and friends in your popular paintings, in the history paintings. This is the selection of history paintings at Documenta this year.
Yeah.
But you also, can you talk about this?
yeah, this is the Documenta version of a Aboriginal tent embassy. It was the biggest tent I've ever had. It's and it's facing to the Friedrichsianum, and that guy at the back there, that's the king of Germany who built that building, and it was the first public museum in the world, wasn't it? Well, that's what the.
That's correct. I'm told by my art historian friend over there in the front row, who's from Kassel.
Yeah, the positioning of that, was outside, the power, that the Friedrichsianum represented. The curators asked me what I was thinking about doing for Documenta, and I sent them 5 ideas, and I expected them to pick one or two, and they they told me to do the whole lot. So I did, this project, my Aboriginal Embassy project, where I invite guests who are experts in their field, mostly my friends, and I pay them really well. Or the museum pays them really well. So, and we just get in there, and I allow them to talk about whatever subject they want to talk about. So, and it makes it really easy for me then. I'm the only one who don't get paid for it. So I try to take the easy way out.
Can you talk a little bit about when you did a Aboriginal tent embassy in New York, who you invited? Because that's kind of when we met, and it's not, again, it's one of the most important moments. It makes you really, the mischief one, it's so important, but not many people know about that and what happened there. You want to talk about who you invited, who came?
Oh, yeah.
It was 2015, right?
2015.
Part of Performa in New York.
Yeah. Well, I invited Emery Douglas, who was the Minister of Culture in the Black Panther Party in the 60s and 70s. Also invited some to come down, the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party. I invited Sylvia McAdam, who was one of the co-founders of Idle No More, and also the Tiny Houses project, and also there was a couple of arty-farties there, like Terry Smith, the historian, and the rest were just my friends. Oh, except for the young women who started Black Lives Matter. They came down there as well. And we just talked about whole heap, whatever it was that they did. But that lineup was spectacular. Really, thinking about what has happened since, and with Black Lives Matter in particular. So.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how you can, you feel that what you've been doing aligns with movements like the Panthers and Black Lives Matter and movements all over the world for Indigenous folk and land rights and civil rights?
Yeah, well, I've got a friend in New York, who's he's part of the Six Nations, and I invited him there too. I've invited him to about 5 of them, I think. The first one he was in Moscow, and I've had a couple in New York. I went to, who's that mob does, they do an art journal or whatever. Young hip kids.
Where?
Downtown.
In New York?
Yeah, Manhattan.
Not Performa.
No, not Performer. There was, anyway, early onset, dementia.
But I mean, I think talking about how that platform and that way in which you set it up, and it's, it's an ongoing, first of all, it's been an ongoing demonstration, right?
Yeah. Well, I try to replicate, the intent of the Aboriginal people. With that original embassy, it was meant as a platform, to say things, to say important things, to get together, to show solidarity with each other.
And so you want to talk a little bit about your work together with Emery and
Yeah,
you had shows together and did things together over the years. Let me see if I can find it here.
Yeah, we went through the Sydney Biennale in 2008, which was curated by Carolyn Christoph Bakajev, and she brought me down to Sydney and was really excited to introduce us, and we hit it off pretty much straight away, and we began working together. We collaborated. This is a show that he had in Brisbane with the gallery that represents myself, and we've probably done more than a dozen collaborations.
This is a collaboration here, right?
Yeah.
You want to talk about that one?
Yeah, well, this is an image that Emery drew up of the protest by a couple of black athletes from the United States after the 200 metres, the men's 200 metres in the 1968 Mexico City Olympics. And they made this statement. At the time we did this, this image, was the 5th most Googled image, in the history of the world, sort of thing.
But who's the white guy?
The white guy's an Australian, actually. You notice that he's wearing a badge there. That badge is the UN Commission on Human Rights or something. And he wore that badge in solidarity with these guys. They actually asked his permission, to make this gesture. So, and he allowed them to go ahead. And more than that, he showed solidarity by wearing that badge. And he never ran for Australia again. Never, even though he still holds the Australian record for 200 metres that he set that day. And the next Olympics in Munich, he missed out. So he got punished. These guys got sent home, got their medals taken off them, and they were returned much later. But the sort of damage was done, to them for basically set. They were protesting. They went out bare feet. You can't see it in this thing, but that was a gesture, protesting against poverty, and that was in support of the poor. So they didn't do it just for black and brown people. So.
Can you talk about the gloves?
The what?
The gloves.
Yeah.
Great story.
They was both supposed to have these gloves, but John Carlos, he left his gloves back at the Olympic Village, and there wasn't enough time to get back there. So Peter Norman suggested that John Carlos wear Tommy's left glove. So instead of having the right fist salute, like there's John Carlos has the salute with the left-hand glove.
Yeah, I never noticed the gloves before I saw it in the painting. In the photo, I never noticed the gloves.
Oh.
So this is a mural collaboration you and Rich and Emery did. Is it 2014 in Brisbane?
No, 2011.
2011, and then it's in the collection of the Art Gallery of New South Wales, I believe.
Yeah, I believe, yeah.
So, this as a painting is in that collection in Australia. This, I thought, was All Power to All the People. Is this a solo show with Emery, or did you all do a two-person
solo show. Yeah.
Okay. And then I just brought this in because I think it's really important to see. This is Emery speaking at Fisk University in 1972. I don't know if you all can read it on the screen. It's a little degenerated, but the artist has to sit down on the ground, has to hear the sounds of the people, the cries of the people, the suffering of the people, the laughter of the people, the dark and the bright side of our lives. 1972 is significant here because it's also 1972 that the first Aboriginal embassy in Cambria happened. So I think this is October and it's January, so some 10 months before in Australia, that moment that Richard commemorates in the paintings. That's you and Emery.
San Francisco MoMA.
Yeah. And that painting is the painting you all see, if you have not already, as part of In Situ here. You want to talk a little bit about this one?
This is a still from a film where Emery walks out, and stands in front of the cops, daring them to arrest him, sort of thing. So.
What's the significance of the money clip?
Pardon?
What's the significance of the money clip?
Oh, I think he's letting everybody know that he's got some money, because usually when the cops get you, and you have any money, they take it off you.
If you come tonight to see the film at Gene Siskel, you'll see a lot more about, Richard and friends, the people he's been part of, who's been part of what he's done. So I do encourage that. Sorry I keep skipping around in this.
When I got to Sydney, I ended up going out with I think there was 11 of us. And 8 of us are still alive, and we're still friends. That was like almost 50 years ago.
So obviously, collaboration and friendships and partnerships and solidarity is the key factor for you.
It's really important. Our culture lends to that, leads us in that direction. So we were always with each other. Things have changed so much now. Government programs are designed to separate us. They destroyed our community. In the inner city of Sydney, there were something like 30,000 of us living there at one point, and now there'd be less than 1,000. So they've just been separated everywhere. So I ended up going back to my home state. From there, after, the cops came in and they basically bombed us, with heroin, our community.
Can you talk a little bit about Bell's theorem?
Yeah.
Sorry, I switched that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's all right. Bell's theorem is, it's the original Bell's theorem is written by a guy called John Bell, who's this Irish mathematician, and his theorem is about quantum physics. So, and there's an artist that I came to admire. He put me onto this art and science thing. So I came back from art. I'd not been making art for about 7 years, I think, while I was helping to raise 3 young children. And in getting back into art, I realised that I was told by one of my friends, an artist called Vernon R. Key. He told me that I needed to participate, get to know and to participate in the discourses that were happening in and around art, globally. So I had a look at all of them, most of it was written by white people, mainly white men, and hardly any of it interested me. So I said, "Fuck it, I'm going to write my own." So I wrote this essay about which critiqued the Aboriginal arts industry, and it was subtitled It was Bell's theorem. Aboriginal art, it's a white thing. So, and I went ahead to prove that it was a white thing, that there was, and that there was no such thing as an Aboriginal art industry. There was, however, an industry that catered for Aboriginal art, and that was all run by white people, and it caused a huge conundrum there in Australia. Like they didn't know what to do, and well, I painted this picture to win the National Aboriginal Art Award, and I called it, Bell's theorem, Scientia Metaphysica, science is metaphysical. So, because that's what John Bell was banging on about. And then I attached the essay to the wall, so there was like 12 pages, tied into this artwork that I did. And it took about 3 or 4 years before the industry that caters for Aboriginal art to come to terms with that, with that accusation. So they started calling Aboriginal art contemporary art. So, and I wrote an essay this year, 20 years after, and I called that contemporary art, it's a white thing. Bell's theorem, contemporary art, it's a white thing. So that it's the same story. Like there was, as before, there was the exploitation of these artists, mainly from remote and impoverished areas. You know, so. And the second one, you should really try to read them.
You can read it. It's available at our booth in the magazine, so we published it.
Yeah, all my friends tell me it's great. You know, so.
But yeah, I think, and I did segue pretty quickly, but I think talking about your work and your involvement and your interest in and your real deep dives into other disciplines, not just writing, but science. And, you know, most people don't really look at your work and think instantly you're someone who's keen on science and math, and that those things influence your practice as a political
I thought I was
artist.
going to be a writer, but there was no money in writing, so like there's money in painting. You know, there's a painting here that talks to that as well.
Yeah.
I say all this text here in the background there. You know, like that's all for the art historians to read and that sort of thing. Ducking and weaving.
That painting's from 2011. It's pretty early.
Which one?
I think that one.
Oh, right, okay.
It's a pretty early one, right? In that series. Maybe I got the date wrong.
No, that'll be about right.
I'm not an art historian.
I got no idea. I just do them.
But I think that's another instance where you make your viewer work hard. You know,
Yeah.
you're putting people to work in a sense
Yeah.
by making them read, you know, move around. Also, not just physically move in and out, but also transport between what we think of as, you know, traditional or Aboriginal or native art or whatever other kinds of terminology is used, primitive practice, and you import some of those visual markers, but then with Impressionism, you know, obviously with bright colors,
Yeah.
and then a lot of text.
Yeah, well, apparently, like the science says that 3 and 4 colours combinations are irresistible to the human eye. It's like, you know, like something moves in the jungle, you know, like we'll look for it. You know, like it's the same thing with 3 and 4 colour combinations. You know, I think that's manifest in the flags of nations. You know, most of them are, you know, 3 or 4 colour combinations. But if you embed text into those 3 and 4 colour combinations, you bypass the conscious and go directly to the subconscious. So, and I didn't know that I was doing that, you know, until somebody told me. You know, so I was like, wow, what a genius! Yes.
But that's kind of you made a step from this kind of painting to these history paintings. The history paintings are relatively recent practice, right?
Yeah.
It's
I
new.
tried to stay away from it for as long as possible.
But here we go. Here they are at Documenta. You know, what some people think is the most important contemporary art show in the world.
I think it is.
Other than this, troublemaker. I want to get to a... Huh?
You can Google more shit than that. You know.
Let's just talk about this one real quick.
Okay.
Little Johnny, right? Oh, no, sorry. Pigeonholed.
Pigeonholed, yeah.
Where's the title come from?
Well, it comes from, you know, the desire, you know, like of white people to, you know, categorise things, you know, to categorise everything, as you know, to pigeonhole everything. So, there's a couple of nursery rhymes, maybe, you know, like Tinker Tailor Soldier Sailor. You know, the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. I changed it slightly to look at some of the stereotypes or the beings, you know, in this picture. So like it's a drinker. it's a tailor, and like soldier, as in slavery, into slavery, failure, butcher, baker, troublemaker. You're like the reason why there's a mirror at the end there is because that piece was originally 7 photographs, and I sent the work to a show in a big museum, the Art Gallery in New South Wales, and one of the install staff stole the photo and the drinker label. So I refused to make another photograph, and I just moved these guys along and made another drinker label, and then for about 2 or 3 years that piece just had a blank thing, and then I was in a show in Austria, and somebody suggested that I put a mirror there. I thought, wow, I just had a great idea. Why don't I put a mirror there? So, and by the time I showed this piece in New York City in 2009. There was a mirror.
Yeah. And I mean, again, that social aspect of it. I mean, it's makes it into a performative.
Yes. Yeah.
Situation, not just a work on the wall.
Yeah.
And we're not just reading something, moving around it to see it, like in the White Lives Matter, but here we see ourselves.
Yeah.
And
as
so,
a troublemaker.
As a troublemaker.
Yeah.
And it almost is like, urging us to go out in the world and make some trouble. But I don't know. That's the way I read it.
Yes. I encourage it. Like the French do. If the government does something really stupid, go to the rich area, and burn their cars. I don't get invited to talk at universities anymore.
Weren't you there yesterday at Northwestern?
Yeah, but that was to a little private selection.
Okay.
And I never invoice.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, well, especially here in the US, you realise how many forms you got to fill out to get what a lousy few $100.
I don't know. I think Expo was pretty generous.
Mate, I don't get out of bed for that.
I mean, you're making art as they call it political art, right? But is art then a form of protest?
Art is the greatest protest. It's probably the oldest protest, one of the oldest protests as well.
Is that a Western thing?
I think it goes crosses all cultures.
And have you been places where it's not possible, other
Pardon?
than universities? Have you been places where it's not possible, other than universities, where you're not speaking anymore?
Yeah, I've been to quite a few places. I went to Moscow. They were pretty scary. Like the night I arrived there, one of Putin's enemies got shot on a bridge, about 300 metres from the Manege. So, and I've been to Indonesia, where it's you got to be careful.
Well, maybe not that people don't realize it, but Australia is really much closer to Southeast Asia than we are here.
Yeah, it's 200 miles, to the closest Indonesian island. So.
And so, as you started to be involved as an activist and protest and making art, were you also aligning with, say, places and people in Indonesia and other places? And so how do you kind of, make things that can speak to, more than just you and I?
I think we're beginning to. Australia's a strange place. uh, it's out in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, you know, like, and everybody's looking back to Europe, you know, like, you know, and we got, you know, more than half the world's population just to the north of us, you know, so we need to be, you know, focusing more on, you know, our near neighbours, you know, like, and you know, like, Aboriginal people have been trading, you know, with them for, you know, millennia, you know, so we just haven't got to that level. I don't think us looking for freedom, you know, looking to a country with less freedom than us, sort of thing. So I think that probably explains why we haven't. But I can tell you, art is the best way to protest. You know, like, the means, you know, to protest through art, but particularly contemporary art. You know, like, and how it's changed so much. It just allows for so much to happen, and I think one of the reasons for that is because of, you know, the restrictions in some of these countries. Like, in Australia, it's very rare that art, like, that, they're really smart. You know, they don't censor much. You know, like.
Well, I remember at one time the artists decided not to participate because of the policies of the government and the funders who were involved in the Sydney Biennial, who, you know, really had been themselves as their corporate sponsors. So artists themselves decided not to participate. So they removed themselves because of the sponsor being.
Yeah, I wouldn't join that process. Wouldn't support it, because the Sydney Biennale before, there was one of the sponsors had this huge $780 million contract with the government to build housing for Aboriginal communities, you know, like in the Northern Territory, and 18 months into that, 75% of the money had been spent, and not a single house had been built. And I wanted people to protest, you know, like, against Transfield for that. So when that came along, I just thought, bugger it. And besides, you know, all money's dirty. You know, I take money from the Australian government. You know, they've been involved with illegal wars. You know, like, I think you people know a little bit about that too.
So art being the best way to protest and not get arrested is how you started this conversation.
Yeah, well, it is, but, you know, like, gee, there's a lot that goes on to that. There's you know, almost the intimacy of people, you know, getting together, you know, to look at art, to make art, you know, in the distribution of art, into the schools, with the education and that. Art is such a big part of our lives. In fact, in Australia, the arts industry earns as much money as the mining, the coal mining industry.
The commercial art industry.
The arts, you know, like the total arts, you know, like performing, and, you know, like the theatres and the concerts and that sort of thing, and but we pay tax.
I was going to say paying taxes.
Yeah, you know, like, and these mining companies don't pay tax, you know, and yet they keep getting subsidies, and they keep cutting art funding. And so, you know, it's a really good idea to protest about things, you know, like, you know, rich neighbourhoods, cars, Incinerators.
You said one thing about, art, seeing art together, getting people together. It's one of the reasons why I really still, I really advocate for art, actual art in public, where people not only go and see the work and have access to it, but where they are seen and can be seen themselves, and somebody else also can see somebody else looking at it. There's a sense of when we're together in a space, we have a certain amount of accountability. At least there's somebody else watching. Now, I don't think they're watching in a vicious way, but there is a sense of that creates some sort of social expectation. Not only that we both decided to come there, all of us decided to come here, but that we're aware of it being available to all and to others. And from my purposes, I also think that I want to keep making and facilitating for that to happen, which also means like a little bit of de-emphasis on, say, virtual spaces. Not to say that those are not important to some and many people, but I hope that our art spaces continue to be places where we can show up in person and maybe even talk to each other, and at least see it and being seen, being acknowledged, being sort of accountable. There's a kind of moral aspect to this, I guess.
Yeah, them damn pandemics, close down the opportunities for exactly what you're talking about. It's look. I have something to to say to my friends. Like they're obsessed with sport. And I just say to them, look, I can live without sport. But I can't live without art, and neither can you. And they look at me and they say, yes, we can. I said, no, you can't. You're gonna not listen to music. You're not going to dance. You're not going to go to the movies. You're not going to go to a rock and roll concert. You're not going to read a book. All these sorts of things. You cannot just go through life just with sport. It's just so one-dimensional. Or maybe two.
I'd rather invite every other, people in the audience to talk. Richard is somebody who really likes conversation. So if you, I don't know, how, excuse me. How many minutes do we have? Okay, so we'll start with some questions, and then if we want to continue the conversation, 1-to-1, 10-to-1, 20-to-1, excuse me. We can also, go out and see, out into the booth or the bar, and
The bar says good.
yeah, he says bar. So let's hear some comments, questions.
Thank you, Richard, for your talk. Could you comment on the power, the recipe, the reason why art that communicates works so well in the case of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter here in the United States? Why is that working?
Say that again?
The art of Black Lives Matter is something that individuals make and put a poster in their own window of their own home, and I think that that is a grassroots type of art that communicates to neighbors the message and relays that message. Is there some sort of an ingredient, some sort of a reason of why that type of art is an iconographic type of look or slogan that works so well?
I think it is. There's, like you say, if people have got it in their windows, that's kind of a big deal. And somebody came up with that. Probably an artist. Came up with that slogan. So, I think the jury's out, probably still out on that, whether the success or not of it. I think it's been amazing, that protest movement. I think it probably does need a bit more, become a bit more performative, especially we in the arts, we could make that, more performative and that. But I don't know. I don't know that much. I just don't have an answer to that.
Hi, Richard. I'm from Australia originally, from Nam, but I haven't lived there for like 14 years. I am curious, because you've worked with Emery Douglas, we're obviously seeing your work in the US, your work's been shown in Europe and Australia, of course. I feel quite disenfranchised by the Australian government, and I'm wondering if you see the same impact that your work has in the US or in Europe, or Black artists have in the US and Europe. Is Australia kind of as receptive to protest art in maybe changing reform or getting people to stand up and demand change, especially for the Indigenous community?
No. Yep. I could say, I could just leave it at that.
Don't want to sell me the dream.
That would be the probably the best answer. Look, there's multiple levels, multiple issues. The biggest one, the most obvious one, is capitalism. And how it's corrupted democracy. So that we don't have the democratic rights that we should have. But gerrymanders, break it up. There's also the small issue, the not so small issue of white supremacy. It's a colonial project. That's what's at the heart of this thing. One of the works that I did for Documenta is a digital sign that was situated at the top of the Friedrichshain, and that sign, that digital sign, signified how much money the Australian government owed Aboriginal people since 1901. Now, the number is just absolutely ridiculous. There's no way that anybody in this world could repay that. So there has to be some kind of negotiation, and that's what this is an artwork that's promoting a negotiation. It came at a really good time too, because there's this voice to Parliament nonsense that they're talking about there at the moment. We don't need a voice to Parliament. We need reparations. We need land back. And we need to be part of the system, to be empowered within that system. We need to have designated seats in both houses of Parliament, in all the parliaments in the country. So, that's how we have to be looking at things like that. And we'll never get to these positions unless somebody has to imagine these things first. We have to imagine victory, really, and come back from that and just see what it is that we need to undo, what we need to replace, or we might have to invent something new. Maybe then a voice to Parliament might be handy, but only if it represented the interests of the poorest Aboriginal people. All the rich Aboriginal people are in support of this voice to Parliament. Whereas the people at the bottom, there's no benefit for them because they don't own the companies that are going to get the millions of dollars, the hundreds of millions of dollars, to administer this thing. So, there's probably $1 billion up for grabs, and all the uptown blacks are going to be jumping in for their share.
Well, thank you.
All right. We got time for one more question.
Hello. Thank you, Richard. I appreciated especially what you said about you can live with a lot of things, but you can't live without art. I agree with that. The power structures of the art world feel overwhelmingly white, Western. They rely on a certain kind of wealth gap, at least at present. What do you hope that your work ultimately accomplishes in this space, and how? I mean, do you see yourself as participating in this art world, or positioned against it, or trying to change it? And how do you hope to do that?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to change it. I'm writing about it. I have 2 essays that address this issue. Part of my work is to critique the art world. Critique contemporary art. For instance, in the Australian situation, we have Aboriginal art. And we have a culture that's the longest continuous culture in the world, and that art is positioned below Australian art. There is not one single department of Aboriginal art in any Australian art institution, right? It all comes under Australian art. And yet Aboriginal art is 10 times bigger in both numbers of sales and the value of sales than the rest of Australian art. So we asked for that. We demanded that back in, decades ago now. Not one still. So we continue this fight with regard to participating in the art world. I do participate in the art world. See these things here. In a fair exchange, you give me some money. You can have it, sort of thing. So, but for instance, I'm going to the Tate Modern next month to have a show in the Turbine Hall with my tent embassy. I want to bring as many black and brown people, or even white people, in that place who should have had a show at the Tate Modern before me. Right? So, and I'm going to invite them in, and they'll be able to put on their CV that they've participated in the Tate Modern. So this is a way of contaminating the process, sort of thing. So I produced a Richard Bell reader for Documenta, and people, and I gave them away. I printed up a couple of thousand and gave them all away. And somebody said to me, people are going to sell them. They'll get to be worth a lot of money. I said, no, they won't. I'll print some more. So that's what, some of the ways that we can work against the market, or expand the market's mechanisms, in our favour, sort of thing. So I think we have to imagine, how we can better deal with this thing. How we should be imagining how this art world can be better. Yeah, and then talking with each other, you know, like, and come to some sort of agreement on what we want to do. You know, we don't know what we want. That's the problem.
Thank
Does
you.
that answer you?
Yeah, thank you.
That one.
I don't know if do we have time for one more?
We are out of.
We're out of time, but you know, like I said, best to do this face to face. And thank you all for showing up. I really do appreciate it. If you haven't seen his work, well, I don't remember. Our booth number is 154. I remember that now. And then, you know, Richard's coming to New York next week. He's going to be showing work there. And then his film is actually premiering in Toronto. So the special screening tonight is something I do encourage. It was especially set up with Expo and at the Gene Siskel Theater. Richard will be there doing Q&A after. And I thank you all also just for your contribution, for showing up, being part of art, and taking whatever we've talked about today back to wherever you came from and put it to work.
Yeah, thanks for supporting art and artists.